thank you so much for all being here. We are excited to offer this coffee chat today. I am the director of BSU Cape Cod in South Yarmouth. We've been there for almost 5 years now. And I'm also the president of the board on the Technology Council. So, but I'm wearing exclusively my higher ed hat today. And I thought I would do, my goal is to accomplish 3 things. First is if you have questions, feel free to just interrupt. It's fine. I don't think there's that many of us here, so I welcome that if you have a question or need clarification on anything. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the impact that BSU has as an institution in our region. And then I will talk specifically about BSU's reaction and changes that we've implemented due to this global pandemic that we're all facing. And then finally, I wanted to share with you some information from a foremost expert on higher education about his thoughts for how higher education should move forward in the immediate next semester and over the course of the next year. Does that sound good? All right. So Bridgewater, as you know, is the 10th largest public university or private university in the Commonwealth. We have over 70,000 alumni, most of whom are still living and working in the greater region of Southeastern Mass. On the Cape, we have over 4,000 alumni living here, working here. In 2019, we awarded 130 undergraduate degrees to residents of the Cape and 38 graduate degrees. We have folks who are working at the largest and greatest organizations here on the Cape. Every public school has a Bridgewater alum as an educator in the school, and lots of them are principals and working in leadership positions, business managers, etc. We also have our alum working at Capabilities, Cape Air, Cape Cod Healthcare, Housing Assistance Corporation, Mass Maritime, Old Colony YMCA, Riverview School, etc. So we're all over the region having an impact on our economy and our civic life. We also, Bridgewater is quite innovative in regards to internships. We are working towards a goal of having 1,000 paid internships because we recognize that for our students, they need to earn money while they're learning, and most of our students would have to pick either between an unpaid internship or working part-time. So because of that, we are working really hard on the goal to offer 1,000 paid internships, and quite a bit of those internships are happening here on the Cape. We have students at the Barnstable Correctional Facility, Barnstable County Resource Development Office, Cape Cod Hospital, Falmouth District Court, MBL, Teledyne, Wareham Town Hall, Falmouth Town Hall. So, our students who live here are working in those internships. And then we also have students who live on campus and travel down to the Cape to do these internships. I know I had a student last year who was from China, and she was doing her internship at Barnstable County, and she drove down 3 days a week to have that internship, and she absolutely loved it. So that's just a little bit about us as an institution as it relates to our role here on the Cape. But as far as our response to COVID-19, we have moved 100% of our courses online in the matter of weeks, which is a Herculean effort, and we're really proud of our ability to adapt so quickly. We fulfilled every tech request that you can imagine to support teaching and learning. So we put strategies in place to help our students, such as pass, no pass. No, we don't use fail. We just say pass, no pass. So for students that choose that, they can, choose to have that at the end of the semester to help, address all the other challenges that our students are experiencing, like all of us are right now. We also sent out nearly 100 laptops to our students and faculty. We also provided them with hotspots for folks that lived in areas that didn't have access to internet. So every tech request was addressed. Additionally, our institution is able to provide every piece of software to all our faculty and staff remotely. So we have VPN access, and so students can get, you know, whether it's statistical analysis software like SPSS or whatever it might be, or GIS software. Every piece of software is available to our students on their home computers via our VPN network. We also were able to keep our student employees on for far longer than any other institution. We paid them for 2 months, which we were proud to do. I have a student worker who lives here in Sandwich, and I was able to pay her for 2 months, which was great. We moved 3,000 students out of our residence halls very quickly without any incidents. We moved 10 students out at a time, and that was done safely, which we were really proud of. And we've also have about 100 students still living on our campus. So these are students that live potentially in a foreign country that is facing COVID-19, maybe even worse than we are, or students that for whatever reason are not able to return to a safe environment. So they're still living on campus, and they're getting the white glove treatment, because we went from 3,000 students to 100 students. So they're getting quite a lot of attention and care, which is great. We also raised private monies for our student emergency fund, and we have given away $440,000 to 500 students who needed money, emergency money. We processed $9.2 million in refunds to our students. We were the first institution in the state to process the refunds. We understood that our students needed that money back, and they needed it quickly in order to live. So we were proud to be able to do that. So that money was for their parking passes, their dorm, their dining hall fee. So it was prorated, so they all got their refunds in a matter of weeks. We did receive $4.4 million in federal funds, and a half of that money will go directly to our students, and the other half will go to areas that will support teaching and learning. We're currently working with local hospitals, governments, fire, and police to provide housing for frontline personnel up on our main campus. And on the good news front, we were able to turn around a minus 30% enrollment for our summer session 1 and 2, which begins in a few weeks. And we're now in the positive. So we're really thrilled with that. That was in a matter of 3 weeks through aggressive student support and through, our marketing channels. All of our summer courses will be online for both summer session 1 and summer session 2. So in regards to our budget, we are facing we have faced a $13.5 million deficit, obviously due to that $9.2 million that we gave back to our students. But through much hard work and being fiscally conservative, we stopped spending money on a number of things that we had planned on spending money on. We were able to balance our budget, address the deficit, and not go into our reserves, which is, my understanding is it's remarkable that we were able to do that. So, big shout out to the smart people in our areas of finance who are addressing, that deficit that we're faced. The biggest thing is that our president, Fred Clark, is steadfast and determined to support the full-time workforce at our institution. So there's no foreseeable layoffs on the table for our full-time folks, which is great. The goal is to support teaching and learning, and we need, our regular people to do that. Of course, enrollment is key. We're in these unprecedented times. We are predicting an enrollment reduction for the fall, but we really just have no idea what it will look like. There's no model, like higher ed has very savvy predictive models for enrollment, and it's it's a science in and of itself. It's a whole division of every institution. Every institution now has a vice president of enrollment services, but there's no model for, global pandemic. So we don't really know what will happen in the fall, but our hope is that we hope that we will attract some students that perhaps were intending to go to more expensive private universities, but we just don't know. Also, our ability to have our residence halls occupied will have a huge financial impact. So whether or not we can have students living on our campus will be a key indicator of what we will be facing financially. Regarding our state appropriation, our president said last week, quote, "We are going to get walloped. We will likely face at least a -5% reduction from the state, but likely a -10 to -20% reduction from the state. But we'll have a better sense over the next couple of weeks as the legislature debates this, supplemental budget that. So we really just don't know. But just so you all know, even though we're, a public institution, we only get about 20% of our funding from the state, but it still is significant. And, Massachusetts is one of the least funded, Massachusetts is one of the states that funds public higher education less than other states. So if you're a supporter of public higher education, now would be the time to call out to your local representatives to have them consider us in these discussions around budget. Our president has said that FY21 will likely be the most challenging and difficult year in our entire 180-year history, and that we will have to rescue ourselves. So we are okay for FY20, we are okay for FY21, but the work that we will have to do as administrators, faculty, and staff will be serious and really hard. We'll have to make sure that every student is feeling supported in this time and that we're attracting new students, which is obviously a challenge, especially for students that were hoping to have a residential experience in college. Our president said that likely 20 private colleges in New England will be out of business by the end of the year, by the end of the calendar year, and that, obviously many institutions will have to consider furloughs in order to survive. I wanted to share a story though about what these bright moments that we experience in higher ed. I was able to participate in a Zoom graduation this week with a group of master's students at Salem State, where I teach part-time in their higher education student administration program, and that was beautiful and bright, and I was so proud to see 14 students graduate virtually. I wanted to share with you, our president told us a story the other day where a student had reached out to him and invited him to her private Zoom graduation because her mother was terminally ill with cancer. And so our president, dressed in his full regalia, cap and gown, he wrote a speech, and he participated in a graduation with this young woman and conferred her degree virtually, and her mom sadly passed away 2 days later. So these are the kinds of things that happen behind the scenes in higher ed that motivate me for sure, and to motivate obviously all of my colleagues to keep supporting our students and taking every opportunity to celebrate, especially our students who are graduating this year. Tomorrow would have been our undergraduate graduation, and I know our president plans on going to our Boyden Hall, which is our main administration building, and he's going to sit in his full regalia all day long in his cap, his cap and gown and all that, in a lawn chair. And so if he said, even if one student just comes by to take a socially distanced photo, which he anticipates, I think students will come in their cap and gowns. That's what he plans to do tomorrow. So we're lucky that we have this really strong leadership at the institution that I work at Bridgewater. So just a few bright lights, but back to the bad news. I wanted to share an article that I read, or an opinion really statement from William Tierney. This came out on May 11th. Bill Tierney is the foremost expert on higher education policy analysis in the country. He literally wrote the book on governance, policy analysis, and administration. I've read a lot of his books. He's very highly regarded. And he states that even the most optimistic epidemiologists have two opinions about the remaining months of 2020. One is that mass gatherings should be prohibited and people over age 55 and or with pre-existing conditions should continue to stay indoors. And that he also points out that people under age 25 are least likely to become sick with the coronavirus, but are also most likely to flout requests to stay indoors and wear masks and avoid public places. So this is the conundrum, right? How do we keep our faculty safe? He points out that over 40% of tenure-track faculty are over age 55. So that's something that we need to really keep in mind. Oh, Robin, I'm sorry about your coffee. I saw you moving around quite a bit. I was like, what's happening? Oh, poor Robin, she spilled her coffee. So he says the option of returning students to campus in the fall is just not viable, and he outlines four reasons for that. Or four parameters that he said should happen. So one is that all public gatherings should be canceled. All the football games, all the sports, basically everything. That putting people in crowded arenas, tailgating parties, fraternity parties is just not safe at this time. He also pointed out, like I mentioned before, that anyone over age 55 or those who are immunocompromised should not come to campuses until 2021. He also points out, number 3, is that we need to create conditions for a disease-free campus, so that everyone that comes to our campus should be virus-free, and that means that college campuses should have the ability to require or implement testing on their own, and that conduct rigorous contact tracing as needed as a strategy. I know that we're talking about that at Bridgewater, like how can we utilize the apps that we have, can it be mandatory? I know I've talked to a lot of, colleagues, and they're like, oh yeah, I had COVID-19. My husband had it, my kid had it. And, when we finally get to a place where we start to reemerge, what channels will we provide for faculty and staff to report that and make that required? And then number 4, he says to ban any class or event where social distancing is not 6 feet by 6 feet, and that obviously students should not be crammed into lecture halls or dining halls or residential halls. He discussed the concept of, the idea of us, of higher ed as an essential economic driver in the US. He says it's impossible for us to have successful institutions where we can't have public gatherings, but and points out that the economic consequences will be devastating to American college campuses. He says that more than 5% of the 4,000 US colleges and universities are likely to close because of falling enrollment. And he says that many observers now predict that the enrollments will, sorry, I lost my page. The enrollments will shrink by 15%. Another issue that he points out that's troublesome is that, the continued xenophobia on behalf of the Trump administration will shrink foreign student enrollment, especially from China and India, predicted by 25%. He points out that, of course, public health comes first, but that policymakers will need to think about U.S. higher education and its importance. He reflected on the fact that, we had been, over the last century, the envy of the world, and that a better educated nation raises productivity, competitiveness, civic engagement, and that U.S. higher education has led an innovation that has, social, scientific, and cultural breakthroughs. and that in order for the U.S. to rebuild its economy, a healthy post-secondary education, higher education setting will be essential. So he made a few suggestions around what it will take to maintain and help U.S. higher education essentially survive. So he suggests that students earning less than $150,000 per year should be, that their loans should be forgiven for the fall, and that grants should be provided to cover the difference for those students who cannot afford tuition. He also says that institutions should receive bridge funding as long as they can demonstrate that they have adequate enrollment for in January 2021. And obviously that, states seriously consider how they fund public higher education and increase funding to public institutions. He says that the cost will be very high. It will probably exceed $50 billion, but that obviously the cost of letting higher education fail would be even greater and probably unmeasurable. So I can certainly share this link with you. This was posted in Inside Higher Education. The title of the article was "Students Should Not Return to Campuses This Fall, Regardless of the Financial Implications." So, yeah, I didn't mean to end on a kind of sour note, but that's the information that I have to share with you today. I would love to hear from all of you about your experiences and thoughts around higher education, specifically maybe public higher education. I know that here on the Cape, they've already announced at Cape Cod Community College that they will be fully online in the fall, which the more the thought that I've given that, I think it's smart. There's been quite a few community colleges that have already made that announcement. If you've followed their marketing at all, they have, they're posting articles saying like, why would you spend, $50,000, $70,000 to go to, Stonehill or Boston College or wherever to study online and live in your, your high school bedroom. Just, defer a year, come to 4Cs. I think that it's smart of them to be aggressive and to offer that as an option. I think that, for parents that are, understandably concerned about sending their kid off to the world in a global pandemic, it would be a smart fiscal move to, send your student to a community college at a fraction of the cost. So that's been interesting to follow along on. Any other thoughts or questions from folks?
Hey, Jen, I got a question.
Sure.
I apologize if you said this already and I missed it while I was mopping. The internships, have you figured out a way to have the interns work remotely during this process, or is that on hold until people can physically appear again?
Yeah, it's like our grad assistantships and our internships had been taken on a case-by-case basis. So essentially, if the student could provide a work plan with their employer that had, meaningful work for them to do remotely, they were able to get that approved. So I don't know offhand like how many students took advantage of that and kept working in their internship. I don't actually know off the top of my head, but I know that it was offered as an option. So good question.
Thank you.
Jen?
Yeah.
This is Brian.
Hi,
So
Brian.
I'm curious, with the emergence now of all the online classes that folks have emerged to, do you think there's going to be a greater inclusion of the of what's out there? I know I'm trying to think of the website, the EduX, the large array of courses, at MIT, Harvard, and other.
Yeah, like open source courses.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if this is a great opportunity to start to blend some of that. Maybe it's for lectures, but it just amazes me how much is actually out there and available, and if that could be harnessed and somehow included within the curriculum that professors are trying to build. It could be.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know that my role has sort of shifted recently, and I have a new title. I'm like the director of I don't even know my new title. that's what happens when you get a new title in a global pandemic. You're like, what's that new title again? But part of my new role is I'm really focused on, like community and corporate partnerships and training opportunities that we can provide in that setting. So I run our senior college, and I use a lot of that material. I've used it now to help supplement because we can't meet in person. It'll be interesting to see, how, this impacts just people's, if you can access content for free,
Right.
And it's online, but most of the time we would argue that the hands-on experience is what differentiated us, right? Is the being in a lab or being in our maker space on our main campus, like having these, actual personal, in one-on-one experiences. So yeah, I'll be curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and I don't mean to supplement or take the place of it, and I'm sorry, I'll let, sorry for the engaging the conversation, but I just wonder for a point lecture, because some of these EduX courses are taught by these very powerful, like I know in the genomics space, which is where I work with pharma, and I'm not a pharma person, so sometimes I'll jump on these classes just to get a little bit more in-depth knowledge of sequencing the genome. But it's interesting to me that you could get a single lecture, bring that in, and then build that into kind of a classroom reaction to, and supplement of. So that was my thought.
Yeah. Eldon?
Hi. Hey, one other thought too. On Tuesday, Dean Norrie of the Harvard Business School had a webinar. I don't want to make you feel bad. There were 2,500 people on that one. But anyway, one of the points he made was that one advantage they found in the online classroom was that they use the case method, so it's a lot of discussion, but that they could bring in alumni to take part in those discussions. And I'm extending that to, not only alumni in your case, but of local people or even non-local people, that they could offer some advantages that you couldn't do in a physical classroom where people wouldn't, you'd have to fly them in or whatever.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that. At the Zoom graduation that I attended for a master's program at Salem State the other day, many of the students did their final capstone presentation on this one specific author, and they all just really loved her work and really vibed with it and engaged with it over the course of their 2 years in their program. And so the program coordinator reached out to this woman who's the foremost authority. She created a new theory it's called the theory of self-authorship in higher ed. And she came to the Zoom graduation. And in the students, it was like they were meeting I don't know, Katy Perry or whoever. I mean, they were their jaws were dropped, but we would never have asked her to do that if we had not been virtual, right? So I think that is a really good point. How can we, use this as an opportunity to help people get access to alums or scholars or whatever it might be? It's awesome. Robin.
Hey, Jen. So this is pretty interesting. I think on one of these Friday chats, we've talked about the speaker we had in February on telemedicine, who is coming back in July to talk about the dramatic changes that have occurred in that field in the last few weeks. He came in February and he talked about the obstacles and challenges to getting telemedicine to be accepted by the conventional, medical and insurance community. And of course, now it's telemedicine is the way to go, right? And I just think, this discussion is making me think that education is going the same way, because, education's a little farther along the curve, I think, than telemedicine. But there was a time, 5 years ago when, people thought if you got your degree from an online school, that was just completely not respected. And, is it your thought that the pandemic just sort of forcing all the schools to go to building robust, remote learning, distance learning programs will obliterate that stigma? Do you think that we're going that way?
I mean, I hope so. I know that Bridgewater has been sort of later to the game than a lot of institutions. So the fact that we were able to get every single class online has been, to me, like a miracle. And I think we've been moving more and more of our degree completion programs online. We just announced like 3 over the course of this semester, which is ironic because now everything's online. So I think it's funny that we're marketing our new online classes, and I'm like, well, everything is online. But yeah, I think that it's a great opportunity for institutions to reinvent themselves and innovate. And the big thing at Bridgewater is about, you have to think about the pedagogy of specific how people learn online and how to be engaging. And it's not just message boards and counting how many responses, so I know our faculty are doing some really creative things in that space. And so I think there will be an explosion of like creativity and innovation regarding online, and hopefully a destigmatizing of how people feel about like online degrees.
Right.
I think Stephen and Scott both had a question.
Good morning. I'm glad you mentioned the pedagogy of online learning. I worked in higher ed for 15 years doing tech training for faculty, staff, and students. And of those populations, the most challenging was always the faculty.
Yeah.
There's a degree of, with faculty is like, I don't want to be in a position of not knowing something there. So I'm curious, in the Bridgewater situation, what you're doing to make sure that faculty are producing engaging content, not only through this format, but I guess blending this lecture type of format in with whether it's Blackboard or Moodle that you're using, so that students get a better experience out of education. It's really challenging. I have a daughter at UMass Amherst. She has a major that's a very hands-on kind of thing, and she's not getting the same quality that she would in an in-person situation. So I'm curious as to what kinds of things you're doing for professional support for faculty to kind of improve this experience, because ultimately I think it'll be a competitive advantage for schools that do the best job of this.
Yeah, so, Bridgewater, we've had a very robust, innovative teaching technology center for years, led by Eric LePage, who is a genius, in my opinion, in that area. So the way that we help our faculty develop an online course and is very specifically focused on the pedagogy of learning online. And I know that there's lots of innovations happening. Of course, for the most part, over the past, 10, 15 years, we've been engaging with faculty that want to deliver their content online. So now we're having to deal with faculty who never imagined that they would have to deliver content online. And I know it's been a huge challenge. I think that the folks that work in that area should be, I assume they all should be given promotions and raises. They've been working 24 hours a day, basically, or 20 hours a day over the past 9 weeks or so, or 10 weeks. They're doing a great job. Yeah, I don't know specifically around, the innovation, but I know that it's a very robust, evidence-based work plan to help faculty understand that you can't just do the same thing that you did in class, and you have to be creative about it, and also be mindful just in this environment of like issues that the students are facing, that they're home, they're in, some of our students are very crowded environments. They don't necessarily have the ability to put the camera on and engage in a conversation, if mom and dad are working next door, so there's all sorts of issues that are more crisis focused. So my thing is, I just hope all of our faculty are being kind and giving kind grades in this, this pandemic. And then as we move into the fall, if we're online, then we're really going to have to think about how we can be engaging and helping our students learn in this format. Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, actually sort of 2 related questions. One is, I saw yesterday that Mass Maritime plans to open their campus in the fall. So I'm a little curious about that. I suspect some of that is just because I think a lot of their curriculum probably doesn't work well in virtual environments.
Yeah.
You can't be on a ship and learn what it's like to be out at sea if you're virtual.
Right.
But sort of related to that, so I work at the MBL in Woods Hole, and we've pretty much canceled all our we have quite a few educational programs, especially through the summer, and they've mostly been canceled. And we've talked with some of the courses about doing virtually, but our courses are very hands-on laboratory and not suitable for virtual.
Yeah.
I saw Cape Cod Community College, even though they're planning on teaching remotely next year, they're gonna maybe do some laboratory work sort of spaced out through the year. And I'm curious what Bridgewater is doing about labs. Have they done anything with labs this fall or this spring? And what are the plans for the fall?
Yeah, we've done nothing. All in-person activity is canceled through the whole summer. So there hasn't been any engagement around that. We do have a reopening, I think it's called a reopening task force. So I've been in lots of meetings, talking about that. And we've talked quite a bit about how we could potentially do something similar to what Four Cs has, is that, perhaps we could have, lab classes done in a socially distant, format, or dance classes done, have a dance class go into a giant gymnasium and have everyone be really far apart. So all of that's being considered and talked about. I agree, when this first happened, that was like the first question I said. I was like, how do they do biology? And, I report to the dean of the College of Continuing Studies, and he was like, we're just being really creative, and I think it will, depend on the faculty's ability to translate that information. But I mean, I don't think anyone can say for certain that you can, do that with 100% effectiveness, I guess, my personal hope is like, God, could we, potentially, hopefully get a vaccine sooner than later so that we can bring students back into those settings, because I know that it's just so important. But yeah, everything's on the table and being discussed for the fall. We haven't made a specific decision yet on the way that we will deliver our content in the fall. But the more I read, in the journals and articles online, I mean, it's looking to me like it won't be, we're certainly not going to be back to business as usual in the fall. Angela.
Hi. Thank you for all this information. I wanted to kind of respond to what you're talking about right now. So I teach an accelerated computer hardware and an accelerated operating systems course at the college. And since they're fast, my first term of the hardware course was in person. And then all of this happened, and the operating systems course was 100% online. But we're talking about for the fall. And so just talking about getting creative, because, taking apart a computer is something you really, you need to do. You can't just, I use software. The classes could be online 100%, but you need to get your hands dirty and you need to pull things apart. So, we were talking about it, and what I'd like to do and what I'm hoping we can do is have the kids, the students, pick up the cases and bring the cases home with them. And this kind of segues to what you were saying earlier about the emotional part of the teaching. My operating systems curriculum was all online. Most of our in-person or Zoom conference time was spent talking about more of the personal and sort of, I was really sad at how tough a lot of them had it, due to connectivity, due to crowded houses, I had one student who you could tell someone was in the background telling him, time's up, move along. Mm-hmm. And, but, so we're trying to plan for the fall. And so one of the things about, I think Eldon brought up bringing in local experts and things like that. We can put a lecture online, you know what I mean? And they can watch that. I kind of think about changing it to switching around almost the Khan Academy concept, where the lecture becomes online and then the Zoom time is the work, is the demonstration, is the, we can all do our hardware together, or we can all make time-lapse videos of us doing our hardware, or, you know, making, one of the things I want them to do is make like a YouTube instructional. But you're right, it's so, it's uncharted, even though we've all done this online, we've all taken classes online, but combining that lab part and getting creative and using local experts. And I think, I feel like online courses I took a program at Cornell, and it was all videos. The only interaction was like what you said, where you had like blog posting. And I feel like this pandemic is going to make it turn back into more socializing online and having that classroom experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's super important right now for all faculty to be acknowledging this like moment of crisis that we're all in. I mean, even if you're completely safe in your home and you have adequate resources and you have all your basic needs are taken care of, this is still a completely unusual, you know, once in a lifetime experience for all of us. So I know I had a Zoom meeting the other day with 2 former students at Salem State, and they were taking a class, and they said their instructor never said pandemic, coronavirus, COVID-19. Like, she would just get on the Zoom and be like, okay, so let's get into history of higher ed. And it frustrated them because they felt like there's this elephant in the room, and that, yeah, we need to sort of check in for a minute, you know, like, can you let us just acknowledge this historical moment? And it was ironic because she's teaching the history of higher ed. Like, to me, this would be a great opportunity to talk about what's going on in higher ed, but they just needed to vent. They were like, it's weird, right? And I'm like, I certainly don't want to critique another faculty member, but I'm like, yeah, that's not a choice I would make. You know, I think we all have to be acknowledging what's going on. But I also think that brings up a, you know, interesting innovation. Like, could a student take that box that you provide them, Angela, and go into a room by themselves, like at 4Cs, and have access to the internet and have tools that they need? You know, like, is there a way for us to have socially distanced lab spaces, you know, for things like that? Because not every student can go home and spread out and really get going with that, you know, and feel comfortable to explore it and, you know, have it spread out or whatever, you know. So that's the thing I think about, is like, can someone go into a, you know, private spaces on our campus safely, where, you know, they basically reserve a room or a space for several hours and then it's sanitized before and after they come? I don't know.
I think you're 100% right on that, because one of the things I realized is that one of my students in particular, he's not really supported with his education at home. He lives at home, but school is where he went to do his work. School is where he went to have computer time, to have the internet, to have the discipline to do it, because he's in kind of a busy, crazy, crowded house all the time. And I don't know. I mean, I know that there's talk of, and I know you guys have it set up at Bridgewater and Yarmouth, you can stream your lectures.
Mm-hmm.
So there's talk of, you know, how are the classrooms going to change so you can stream them constantly. So some students that don't want to come, because some don't, some won't, you know, I had one student, he loved the fact that he was online. That was it. He wanted to be done. He did not want to come to class. And so trying to marry that. I know the same with my high school. You know, my youngest daughter, she would love to not have to go back to school 100% of the time.
Right.
You know, she would rather play sports. So trying to find out, how does that work? But then how does that work for instructors too, when you're teaching online and you're also caring for your family and your young kids who aren't in childcare? I don't have that problem, but I'm sympathetic to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that there's teachers with toddlers running around. So how do you balance that? You know, do you keep the class hours and make everyone get online at the same time? And then how do you make that balance in all of the households and in your own?
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Important things for sure for us to be considering. So yeah, I don't have all the answers, but I know that we're going to be needing to work really hard in higher ed, all of us, over the next couple of years as we start to rebuild and, you know, recover and offer hopefully innovative programs. So I think that's good. We've been on for 50 minutes. Thank you so much, all of you, for your attention and great engagement and questions. It was so good to see you all. And Bert, do we have any updates about next things that are happening with the Tech Council?
Well, let's see. Well, first of all, thank you very much. That was great. I mean, far exceeded my expectations. So,
well, because you asked me the other day, and I was like, I have nothing planned.
Right.
This was like a day and a half ago.
Right. Yes. You really pulled it together very nicely. Lots of good information. Not all of it that we wanted to hear, but that's sort of in the reality of where we are now. So thank you for that. In terms of things coming up for the Tech Council, we've got our infrastructure committee meeting next week. That's virtual. You can sign up for that. If you got the newsletter, there's a link to that in there. I'll make sure it's on the website as well. And our first Friday in June is with Tricia Glynn, and she's an expert in technology investing. So there's two sides to it. If there are people who are interested in seeking investment in their technology idea, but also if you are an investor and want to invest in technologies. So there's kind of a double-edged sword on that one. So very much looking forward to that. In July, it's not First Friday. It's not really first anything. It's second Thursday, but we're going to have Dr. Joe Cavader come back. He was our first Friday speaker in February, speaking about telemedicine, which is, funny how all of a sudden now it's become quite so much more relevant. And so he's going to be doing a follow-up on that in terms of what we learned with the pandemic and how telemedicine has become such an important role. So those are some of the things that are coming up. We're going to have a coffee chat next week. Not quite sure what the subject is yet. Maybe we'll just get together. So thank you all for being here. It's nice to see everybody. Scott, haven't seen you in a long time. Nice to see you. Same with you, Steve.
Can I ask a favor, Bert or Jen? Are you willing to send out some of the really awesome statistics and the information that you provided about Bridgewater State? I think that would be great to share in a lot of circles.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know all of those things, and that's very encouraging. I found even with the bad news, that news outweighed it. So I think that's great to share. If you could send that out.
Yeah, sure. I'll share that.
Great. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Everybody for being here.
Oh, good to see everyone. Thank you.
Safe, be well. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.